Good morning. Today is Sunday, January 5th, 2025. After the death of Yaakov, near the end of this week's Torah portion, the Parsha Vayechi, the brothers are afraid. Because years earlier, when Yosef had revealed himself to them, that was in yesterday's Torah portion, Vayigash, Yosef said that he forgave them and did not bear any grudge against them. But the brothers were not completely reassured. Maybe Yosef did not mean what he said. Maybe he still harbored resentment against them. And maybe the only reason that he had not taken revenge on them yet is out of respect for their father. Yaakov was still alive. And so in our Torah portion, when Yaakov dies and they go to bury him, the brothers come before Yosef and they say as follows: Vayashav Yosef Mitzrayma hu ve'echav v'chol ha'olim ito likvar es aviv acharei kavro es aviv. Yosef and his brothers returned to Egypt after they had all gone back to Israel to bury Yaakov. Vayiru ache Yosef, and the brothers of Yosef were afraid. Ki meis avihem, because now their father Yaakov had died. Vayomru, and they said to each other, Lu yistemenu Yosef, v'hashev yashiv lanu, eis kol hara asher gamalnu oso. Maybe now Yosef is going to do to us in recompense for the terrible things that we did to him. And therefore, they go on to say, Ko somru Yosef. This is what the brothers say to Yosef. Listen to these words. So the brothers, they're returning to Egypt after the burial of their father, and the brothers say to Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha v'chatasam ki ra gamalech. The brothers, I'm sorry. I skipped the main pasuk. When they returned, they said, Vayitzav el Yosef lemor. They spoke to Yosef and they said, Avicha tziva livnei moso lemor. Our father said, just before he died, this is the brother speaking to Yosef, our father said just before he died, Ko samru Yosef, tell Yosef, Ana sana pesha achecha v'chatasam ki ra gemalucha. Forgive the terrible thing that your brothers did to you, and don't take any revenge against them. That is what Yaakov told us to tell you. Yaakov says, don't do anything to us. Don't take any revenge. Viata, and therefore they say to him, now, Sana lepesha avdei elokei avicha. Listen to what our father said. Our father said, and forgive us, and don't hold us accountable for the terrible things we did to you. Vayevk Yosef bedabram elav, and Yosef wept when they said these words to him. Well, the text of the Torah indicates that this story that the brothers told Yosef about their father speaking just before he died to give Yosef this message, it was a lie. It was made up. Nowhere in the text of the Torah does Yaakov say this. Even on his deathbed, remember this week's Torah portion has his last messages to all of his sons on his deathbed. And that is where he instructs Yosef to carry out his last wishes. If Yaakov had this wish, he would have said it to Yosef as part of his last wishes. He told him, make sure you bury me in Israel. Don't bury me in Egypt. He would have then said, and don't take any revenge against your brothers. But there's not a word, not a hint in the Torah of what the brothers quote in their father's name. So let's explore two possibilities. The first is, Yaakov did say these words, but it's not recounted in the Torah. Obviously, not every single word that Yaakov spoke is known to us from the text of the Torah. I mean, he woke up, he said good morning, someone passed him a plate of food, he said thank you. I mean, obviously not every single word is quoted in the Torah. And Yaakov had very good reason to say this. It would be very logical for Yaakov to say this because he knew everything the brothers had done to Yosef. They plotted to kill him. They sold him into slavery. They caused him years of abuse and trauma. Remember what happened to Yaakov when he was younger. Esav threatened to kill him when their father died. You remember, Esav was very angry that Yaakov had taken the blessing from Yitzchak. And Esav said, I'm not going to do anything now, but when our father Yitzchak dies, I'm going to kill Yaakov. So maybe Yaakov was worried that Yosef would do the same thing. Especially now that Yosef is now in this position of almost limitless power, right? Second in command in Egypt, he could do whatever he wants. He might decide after Yaakov had died to even the score with his brothers. Now, so why doesn't the Torah record that Yaakov said this to Yosef so that we know it? Well, Yaakov did not say it to Yosef because any promise that Yaakov extracts from Yosef loses its power when Yaakov dies, because Yaakov is not there. So Yosef could do whatever he wants. So Yaakov has the brothers repeat his words so that Yaakov can, so to speak, reach from beyond the grave, right? This is after Yaakov has already died. And now the brothers are telling Yosef what Yaakov told them to tell him. And apparently it worked, because Yaakov cried on hearing his father's words. Presumably cried that that Yaakov suspected that he might even take revenge. And there was peace. There was peace between the brothers. So it worked. Excuse me. Let's explore another path that several of our commentators address, among them Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. And the second approach disagrees with the first and says the brothers lied. They made it up. Because had Yaakov really said those words, he would have said them to Yosef himself, not to the brothers. And the time to have done it was the time at the beginning of our Torah portion when Yaakov is giving Yosef his last instructions privately. Of course, if Yosef promised, he took an oath, right? He took an oath not to bury his father in Egypt and to bury him in Israel. He would take an oath, and of course he would keep the oath. That would have been the time. Yaakov never said it. Our sages derive from here and from other places a concept known as Mishana Mipnei HaShalom. A person is allowed to say something that is not true under certain limited circumstances in order to preserve peace. Now, we've discussed this before many times. There are many circumstances where a person is obligated to say the exact truth, regardless of the harm that it causes. We've discussed this. But Meshanim Ibnei Shalom means that there's nothing negative that would happen by saying this, but there will be some aspect of peace that is retained, because after all, peace is more important than truth. Meshanim Ibnei Shalom. And in this case, it was literally sakanas nefashos. Their lives were at risk. They thought that Yosef might kill them. And so they made up this story. Yaakov said to tell you, don't kill us, don't punish us for what we did. So they made it up literally to save their lives, Meshanim Ibnei Shalom. Again, of course, it's only in limited, certain circumstances, but this would be one of them. But this second approach carries with it another very profound implication. Yaakov did not tell the brothers what they quoted in his name, okay? According to this, Yaakov never said to the brothers, don't punish, tell Yosef, don't punish you. Because Yaakov, for the rest of his life, never knew what they had done to Yosef. The brothers certainly never expected their crime to be revealed. And for them, selling Yosef, remember back in Miketz, selling Yosef as a slave to Egypt was as permanent a disappearance at that time in the ancient world as if they killed him. So they certainly weren't going to say anything. But here's the incredible part. The incredible part is that Yosef also never told his father what they had done to him and how he ended up as the second most powerful person in Egypt. Never does Yosef explain that to his father. Let's revisit that poignant emotional scene from yesterday's Torah portion of Vayigash. Vayavo arza Goshen. Yaakov, with his family, came to Egypt, to the land of Goshen, a part of Egypt. Vayeser Yosef merkavto. Yosef got into his chariot. Remember, he's the second in command of Egypt. He's royalty. Vaya'al likras Yisrael aviv Goshna. He comes to meet his father in the part of Egypt called Goshen. This is now the reunion after more than 20 years. Vayera elav, and he appeared to him. Vayipol al tzavarav, and he fell on his neck. Vayefk al tzvarav od, and he cried on his neck. Vayomer Yisrael el Yosef. Yaakov says to Yisrael, Yaakov says to Yosef, Amusa hapam, now I can die. Acharei ra'osi es panecha, ki odcha chai. Now that I have seen in person that you are still alive, he heard it from the brothers. But now that I see you face to face, now he says, my life is complete. I've now seen Yosef again. And I'm satisfied if I die now. Imagine this scene. But what is not in this scene? Rabbi Meilech Biderman explains the following. In this scene, Yaakov meets Yosef after 22 years. 22 years of Yaakov mourning and worrying and not knowing. Yosef also mourning and worrying and not knowing. We discussed this last week. And then after this scene, they lived together in Egypt, reunited for another 17 years until Yaakov dies. Says the Ramban, Nachmanides, Yaakov never found out what the brothers did to Yosef. Notice, one more time. Let's go back to the scene from yesterday's Parsha. What's missing from the scene? They see each other, they cry. Yaakov says, my life is complete that I've seen Yosef alive. What is missing? Yaakov doesn't ask, what happened? Where were you all this time? How did you get here? How did you come to be second in command of all of Egypt? And Yosef does not volunteer those details. So for the rest of Yaakov's life, he has no idea of what the brothers did. That's why he doesn't tell them to tell Yosef, right? Because he doesn't know about it. That's why they had to make it up. Because Yaakov didn't know about it. And there is a deep, deep lesson that is taught by Yaakov and Yosef to every single one of us and applies in our lives on a practical basis. Yaakov and Yosef, when they reunited finally after 22 years, they did not dwell on the past. They let it go. Their only concern at that dramatic and emotional moment when they were finally reunited was Mikan ve'elach, from here on. What happens now? What will the future hold for us? Whatever happened in the past is irrelevant. They both understood that each of them would have to be a new person together for these last 17 years that they lived together. Now, of course, we should never say this to a person who has suffered trauma. Let it go. Let bygones be bygones. A person has to work on it. And if it's serious, with a professional, to be able to work through and to be able to let it go. And it could take years and it could never happen. So you have to be very, very careful about this. And of course, in order to move forward, sometimes you do have to look back. If there's an apology that's necessary, if there's compensation that's necessary, if there's teshuvah, repentance that's necessary on the other side, before I can move on, the person has to apologize. They have to be sincere. I'm not suggesting for a moment just forget about whatever happened to you and just go forward like nothing happened. No. But that happened. But all of that happened. The brothers apologized to Yosef in yesterday's Torah portion. They did teshuvah. They repented. They became different people. They became better people. It demonstrated in yesterday's Torah portion by the way that Yehuda protected Binyamin. Remember, we talked about this, not the way that they treated Yosef. They were changed. Yehuda was changed. The brothers were changed. They learned from their mistake. But once you've done that, once you've dealt with the issues from the past, there's an apology, it's sincere, it's accepted, there's teshuvah, there's change. Once all of that happens, and obviously you have to do whatever is constructive to do about the past, no matter how long it takes, and each situation will be different. But then you have to move forward. Once it's been dealt with, don't bring it back up. Because it serves no helpful purpose, no constructive purpose. Now, I'll tell you this from my own experience. You may know this from your own experience. To let go and move on, again, depending on all of the appropriate, necessary steps have taken place. But even still, to let go and move on is one of the most difficult accomplishments in life. And it is one of the most helpful and healing and liberating to not be mired and stuck in hate, in guilt, in shame, in anger, in rage. Yosef didn't tell Yaakov what happened because the brothers had sincerely regretted and repented and asked forgiveness. And therefore telling Yaakov at that point would be Lashon Hara, would be speaking negatively about his brothers for no constructive purpose. Yaakov didn't ask because it didn't matter. The only thing that matters was moving forward, letting go, being a new person unburdened by the pain and the hurt of the past. And this lesson is applicable to every single one of us. And it comes to us with such subtlety, by implication, from assuming that the brothers fabricated, for good reason, the words they tell Yosef their father spoke just before he died. Because peace and harmony and moving forward are the primary values God wants us to practice. My friends, I wish you a great day, and I look forward to seeing you soon in person.